When Aristotle first started talking about poetics and about poetry and how we think about fiction, he said it doesn't have to be real. At its core, D&D is part improv theater. It's part a board game. It's part tactical combat. But for the most part, it's cooperative storytelling. So everyone at the table is pitching in. The interesting part about creating a world at a table is everything has to feel extraordinarily organic, even in a world with a suspension of disbelief. That's the first step, is making sure that everything I said makes a certain kind of sense to everyone at the table. It's interesting then to say that people have put in their ideas and put in their time and their creativity and their imagination into something, and there's so much that has to be done to make sure that you don't let that down. Then that leads into getting some sleep and starting the next step, which is this week of figuring out how everything else changes because of that. The number one rule of a game like this has to be fun. So when you really dig into the action, you want to be at the table the whole time. So D&D is played mostly in your imagination, but the way you actually play it is all based on dice and character sheets. It's a pen and paper game at its core. You have a set of stats, and I have statistics for my monsters as well. But even something like jumping a cliff or kicking open a door comes down to rolling dice and adding numbers. You take a villain, for instance, and like any good story, there's protagonists which sit around the table, and there's that other guy. That guy who's doing something horrible we don't like. Whether he's a good guy or bad guy, we don't like him. And in cooperative storytelling, which is really the core of Dungeons & Dragons, we have to make sure that we feel like we're at the center of the story. Heroes are typically reactionary. A bad guy does something horrible, and the heroes do something wonderful and benevolent to stop him. But in D&D, it's a little bit different, because there are storytellers at every seat of the table moving a story forward. The people at the table are absolutely the protagonists, and they will push the story forward with everything they do. So building a villain is this really important thing where the villain has to feel organic and three-dimensional. And then, of course, it comes to on the day. And that's when D&D really kicks off. But not until the actual day that I play do I ever really consider what the characters might be up to. One of the biggest problems you can have when you're running a game like this is overthinking, over-planning everything, and sticking to a really rigid system where there's no fluidity. As soon as you make a really solid plan, you've ruined improv. So then the what's next is, I've got everything figured out, we know our expectations, where we want to go, but then it's time for Dungeons and Dragons. And those two things are really the core of the game. The idea of taking an adventure, which might be as simple as a little tiny painted miniature, and connecting yourself to this character, and bringing them through a massive dungeon, or the wilderness, or even a town that you've just arrived in or that you've been visiting for the last couple of years, or 6 hours every week, is really where the game lives. It's where it breathes. Everything else is just planning. People sit down and I build a world. Everything from laying out tiles to doing something as simple as bringing a massive miniature in and watching people's faces just curdle with fear. There's nothing less satisfying than having a tool in your toolbox that you never need. There's a huge emphasis on making sure you have the right things at the right time. Once you've built all that, you've built what's next, you've built your terrain, you've selected the right monsters at the right time, then it's right into the action. So you really have to focus on here is knowing everything in advance. I want it just to feel like we're in this world for those 6 hours. So you need a huge tower, you need the right monsters, you need everything, including the rules, right at your fingertips. It all comes down to moving guys on a grid, saying what you want to do, rolling some dice.